Hey everybody, Grummels here with episode 2 of the Turnfight Show, where I talk about War Thunder or War Thunder related topics while showing you some nice dogfight footage. Well, patch 1.31 was just released last week and of course provides a few topics to talk about. We got new planes, changes to damage models and other things. Let's take a look at a few of the new planes first. I personally use the P-36 and the lower tier Ki-45s the most, and I had a lot of fun with those too. Now, as far as I am aware, the flight model and damage models are still work in progress and subject to change, and might not represent the historical counterparts yet, so keep that in mind. But let's see how those two planes perform the way they are in the game right now. Let's start with the P-36, the predecessor of the P-40. This was always one of my favorite planes, and I'm very excited it finally made it into the game. While it looks a bit like a P-40 with a radial engine, it currently handles a lot differently. It's quite an agile plane and a good turn and burn fighter, but its roll and yaw will lose authority pretty quickly when you get faster. However, the elevator authority stays very high, so even on higher speeds the plane is very agile around the pitch axis. So when you're faster, you have to fly it a little bit like the old Zeros before the rate of roll fix. If you recall, the Zeros a few patches back had a terrible roll rate, but you could get around that to a certain degree by using the vertical and doing tight loopings. The same with the P-36. When you can't stay on target with roll and yaw, try to loop around completely until you are slower, which should happen eventually in a turn fight. Once your speed is lower, you should be able to turn with most planes, especially if you keep using the vertical. If you meet more agile opponents, like an A5M for example, you can also use the P-36's decent dive acceleration to gain an energy advantage and eventually outclimb your opponent and attack him from above. A P-36 won't dive as well as a P-40, but still better than a lightweight pure turn and burn fighter. Just don't try to outclimb it outright. Most of those agile lightweight fighters climb pretty well too. You need to gain an energy advantage using your dive acceleration first. This goes even more for better diving planes like the P-40 and the Wildcat of course. Well, let's take a look at the armament of the two Hawk variants we have in the game. The firepower is a weak point of the plane, and it is one of the weakest armed planes at its level. The level 3 P-36C has 3 30 caliber machine guns, which are not as effective compared with other nations' guns of the same caliber, and a single 50 cal. And the level 2 P-36A has a single 30 cal and a single 50 caliber machine gun. That is the same armament than a M2P shooter has. The premium version of the Hawk also has this 2 machine gun armament. Because of the lack in firepower, you usually have to stay on target quite a while to get good results. If you can, try to go for a deflection shot, since this improves your chances for good hits. But that of course goes for every plane. Despite its deficiencies, I found the Hawks very enjoyable and fun to fly. Now, the other new plane type I used a lot the last week is the Ki-45, especially the level 4 and 5 versions. So let's take a quick look at this one too. The Ki-45 is the first Japanese twin-engine heavy fighter introduced into War Thunder. It brings with it a few traits you would expect from a Japanese plane. First of all, it is very agile for a twin-engine plane and can go toe-to-toe with some single-engine planes in a dogfight. It is, however, also very fragile, more so than many single-engine fighters. However, here you have to keep in mind that the damage model of the plane is most likely not finished, and it won't stay quite as vulnerable than it is now. I would, however, not expect it to ever become as resilient as other twin-engine fighters. The plane also starts the match at the bomber spawn point, which gives you a nice altitude advantage at the start of the match and helps with hit and run tactics to keep your exposure to enemy fire down. This works especially well with the variants of the plane that have a 37mm gun. The level 4 version, of course, only has one 20mm gun and two machine guns, which is a pretty weak armament for a twin-engine fighter. However, in my opinion, the plane makes up for it with its maneuverability. Now, that was a quick look at the two new planes I played the most last week. Of course, new planes are not the only difference to 1.29. The new damage model has also sparked a lot of discussions on the forum, especially in AB. The opinions are divided. Some people love it and some hate it. And I would like to talk a bit about my point of view on the matter. First of all, I have to say I was not a big fan of the damage model in the later versions of 1.29 in fighter versus fighter combat. I think fighters could soak up too much damage, and I had a lot of cases where I attacked an enemy that was going for one of my teammates, and he was just ignoring me while I riddled him with bullet holes and kept shooting at my teammate. Now in 1.31 you have to react when you get shot at, and in my opinion that's the way it should be. And I think larger caliber cannons, like the 37mm, are easier to balance when smaller caliber cannons, like the 20mm, also pack a punch. So for fighter versus fighter combat, I really like the new damage model. But when it comes to bombers, the situation looks a bit different in my opinion. Multi-engine bombers got hit pretty hard by the changes, and have now a very hard time surviving, even when they are escorted. I can tell you that because I often do escort bombers. The bomber AI gunners are currently not very impressive either, so their survivability could also be boosted by improving them. However, I don't think that would be such a good idea, since it may lead to situations where people fly their bombers intentionally through fighter swarms, hoping their gunners get them kills. I rather see the big bombers more resilient to damage than the AI gunners boosted. It is pretty easy to hit a big target like a bomber in War Thunder, so there needs to be a bit of a boost in survivability to make up for that. Again, it needs to be said though that the damage model is still a work in progress, so in a lot of the extreme cases of bombers dying very fast are most likely not intended but bugs. For example, there are reports on the forums of bombers losing their tail with only a few hits from 30 caliber guns. However, when I was flying my Hawk last week, I never got such results even on single-engine fighters, and I usually needed a lot of 30 caliber hits to get any results on them. So a much bigger target like a bomber losing its entire tail to a few of those bullets sounds like a bug to me, and not the damage model working as intended. So to summarize, I do like the new damage model in general, especially in fighter versus fighter combat, but multi-engine bombers need a bit of a boost to their survivability. Well, that's it for this week's Turnfight show. I hope you liked it, thanks for watching, and maybe I see you next time.